Okay, hey there everyone. It's December 13th, 2015, and you're looking at episode 20 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me are my pals Megan Arns,
Hello.
Laurel Black,
Hi.
and Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
So today we have with us the Director of Percussion Studies and Interim Department Chair at the University of Tennessee, Martin. She's also a founding member of the Kaisha Percussion Trio, and on the side she does this little thing you guys might have heard about. It's called the President of the Percussive Arts Society. So anyway, it's really great to have Dr. Julie Hill with us. How are you, Julie?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it, Casey. This is great.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. So how's everyone doing? It's jury time, I think. Ben, you look like you're dressed all in black for juries. What's that about?
It is actually gig time for me. I am playing, as Laurel told me, Le Messiah this afternoon.
So you know, in a way, I kind of think of the president of the Percussive Arts Society to kind of be our, you know, sort of our boss at large, if you will, in a very vague general sense. And I just want to tattle on Ben because he didn't go to PASIC this year.
Ben,
I know.
what's up?
Well, I heard Casey was going to be there, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's quick. You're very quick. Well, Julie, how are you doing? And just tell us a little what you've been up to, and I don't know how the semester is wrapping up for you.
Everything is wrapping up really well. We finished juries already, and commencement was actually yesterday. I had 2 students graduate, so a little closure there. So now I spend this coming week kind of wrapping up all the end of the semester department chair deadlines, that facilities, fees, requests, and all that exciting stuff. So looking forward to that tomorrow.
You must be busy being department chair and president of PAS. That's quite a workload.
I'm very service oriented, but it's a little too much service at the same time right now, to be honest. I got to tell you, I've got a very understanding husband. It's the only way I'm getting through it.
What is it like? What is day to day for the president of PAS right now?
You know, it's been a lot this past year, just because we've really overhauled the governance of PAS in the past. Well, since John Beck started the process in his presidency, and then I'm kind of the one that's finishing up and wrapping it up, and our former board of directors is now a board of advisors, and now we have a smaller, more lean board of directors that are mainly Indianapolis business folks that also happen to be percussionists. So it's really great, but with that comes like a whole new set of bylaws, meeting structures, committees, financial reporting. It's pretty much been starting from the ground up and sort of figuring out how we're going to move forward, and even how we're going to have the meeting structure, because those guys don't necessarily know like about what the symphonic committee is doing and what the Tennessee chapter is doing. So there's been a learning curve on both sides. I've had to learn a lot of words like strategic plan and benchmarks and all of these types of things. So I've really learned a lot in the past 12 months since January 1st. Just, I mean, if you're going to do anything, you want to learn from it, right? So it's been tough, but great. It's taken a lot of time.
What was the impetus for all that change? Was it just it was getting too bulky to deal with, and you wanted to clean it up, or?
Well, when you have a board of directors that's roughly 30 people, I say it's like trying to turn a barge in a small pond. You know, you meet once a year at PASIC in person. It's just, you can't get anything done really fast. So, and basically they were serving as advisors, so why not let them be called advisors and really what they are. And then we have a smaller, basically the executive committee, or everyone calls it the EC. We were sort of serving as the board, but with a nonprofit, we really needed to have a true board of directors as well that would help us with a lot of financial decisions and fundraising and all sorts of things like that that they bring to the table. So we're really functioning as a nonprofit should now.
Gotcha. Did you add a lot of new people to the board of directors when that structure changed?
Yes, we did, and we had elections, and we found some great people. They're great advisors. They're worker bees, as I call them. They have just, and everything's tough for them too because it's all new. So now we have a governance committee and a compensation committee and an audit committee, and we're really starting to click on all cylinders. It's pretty exciting.
You know, speaking of those different entities you just mentioned, one of our Facebook questions from Ted Jackson was just how exactly does PASIC even happen? Like, how many moving pieces are there in the Percussive Arts Society? And maybe just, I don't know if you can give like a summary of kind of how the whole thing can happen.
It happens because of the team that we have looking at every single aspect of PASIC. PASIC is something, sorry to get back to your question, I will in a second, but we sort of stepped back in this age of free and instant with everything in our society and said, really, what does PAS bring to the table? And we really prioritized that with two things, PASIC and the Rhythm Discovery Center. Those are two things we do really well that nobody else does. So we're really focusing all of our energies into those. And I think a lot of times there's a misconception that PAS has a really huge full-time staff. And we really, as Megan knows, we really don't have that many people. And so we have a few people that work really well throughout the year together. They share a lot of responsibilities. We have a fantastic executive director in Jeff Hartsoe, and before he was our executive director, he was just the PASIC coordinator. So he brings all of this knowledge to the table in terms of working with industry, working with schedules and logistics, and he really coordinates the staff. As you guys know, we start planning a year out, so applications are due January 2nd. So we're already planning PASIC next year. It takes a lot of work, but it's a pretty finely oiled machine, as they say. So it's certainly not because of me.
And then, at what point did you start getting involved in like the organization of PAS? And like, obviously, you don't go from 0 to president, so.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun. It's been a fun ride. My first PASIC was 1989. I was a high school senior, and I went with the local university to Nashville to PASIC. And I remember my first PASIC experience was Wednesday hearing Silver Streetcar. I don't know if you guys know that piece, but it's like a 15-minute triangle solo. And I was like, what is this? Yeah. But then from there, I completely fell in love. I was going to be a chemistry major, and I changed and decided at that PASIC I was going to do percussion no matter what. And so I was not a wealthy kid. So I signed up for logistics that year, actually, and worked logistics and started to see behind the scenes. I think I worked logistics probably for 7 or 8 years. I just enjoyed it and enjoyed helping at the ground level. And from there, some opportunities came my way. Just when I went back to school, particularly at Kentucky for, well, actually at Arizona State, that was back in the old model where you had hosts of the events, and my teacher, J.D. Smith, was the host at PASIC. So I remember being in his office floor as one of the assistants out there, and like then none of the applications were digitized. So I had piles and piles and piles of applications that I was helping him sort. And so I feel like I've been lucky to see a lot of different aspects of PAS and see how it's evolved and changed. And I started serving on the World Committee and Scholarly Research Committee, and then getting involved with my chapter. And I don't know, I guess people asked me to do stuff, and I did it, and it just kind of kept going from there.
You know, speaking of your younger self and experiencing PASIC, and I know we have all had a chance to say that in the past, what would you say to a young person who is not a member of PAS yet or hasn't gone to PASIC from the president's standpoint? And of course, we all know, yeah, you should be a member, and yeah, you've got to go to PASIC. But can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's never been a better time for a young person to get involved. We've re-stratified leadership where you can start service as a high school student, or really even as an involved middle school student. You can be a student delegate before you're ever even at the university level. And now we have university committees. We have a university student from the university committee on all the other 16 standing committees. So we have so much transparency now. With term limits, we have turnover in committees and turnover in leadership, and we're really fostering hearing new ideas. And there's never been an easier or better time to get involved. And so for a student that doesn't know what PASIC is, I say, you know, try to get them there. But the other thing that we've done is, for example, we're starting to try and stream events, which of course is very expensive, but we've been talking about that on the executive committee for 8 to 10 years. You know, not everybody can get to PASIC, so how can we take PASIC to them, and so they can sort of see the magic of what it is. But ultimately, I think you have to go because, as we all know, it's about the people. It's about the people you meet and the relationships that are cultivated, and that really can't be digitized. So getting that in-person experience, you know, maybe they start out with a day of percussion and they get a little taste of it locally in their chapter, and from there it whets their appetite to try and attend a PASIC. This might come up later, I don't know, but I mentioned this earlier, Casey, that one of the things we've talked about is really focusing on what we do well and not trying to be everything to everyone. You know, we we are not a company. We're a nonprofit. So this PASIC model, we've begun to just really start the preliminary discussions of possibly some mini PASICs where we have some regional PASICs, and that way we can, get to students that perhaps can't travel to San Antonio, Texas, and that's really in the infancy stages of discussion, but I think we're going to try to move towards that and still have what we're calling the big PASIC. Every year, of course, too, we wouldn't want to interrupt that model, but that might be another way that we can sort of show young people, as you're saying, what PAS is at a younger age.
Would that happen every year?
Ideally, if we have the staff to do so, yeah, it would. And and again, I'm speaking sort of prematurely about this. We haven't really talked about, the application process, who would be the host, if this would take the place of a chapter day or maybe a few chapters. So you have sort of a southeast PASIC and a west and a northeast. I think we'll just kind of see how it goes. And the number we keep coming at is maybe we do 2 of those a year at a different time from the big PASIC, and try and really keep with that model, which is, we do a little bit of everything at PASIC, and that's what makes it enticing to people.
Yeah.
That sounds like, there's the TED Talk, and then there's TEDx, all these little things. Sounds like PASIC-X.
Yeah, we actually would love to use that name, but it's probably not legal.
It seems like, as I go around and do some days of percussion, it seems like in some states it's just thriving, amazing, strong, super big. Other states it's a little thinned out. And they tell me a lot of times that's just because of geography, simply the location of the school and the other schools, and the days marching band competitions fall, and just the various events of the high schools and universities. One problem that seems really easy to fix as far as attendance is not having your university's day of percussion outside of the state day of percussion. Is there any? Do you ever talk to individuals about that? How do you gently influence and say, hey, could you not do your own day but try to be a part of the day?
Yeah, we do gently, as you say, try and encourage chapters to do that. Also to change the location of where the event is held for the health of the chapter, and it is tough based on geography, but we have some people that do this really, really well. As you mentioned, there are some multi-day days of percussion. A lot of times, if it involves performance or competition of students, it's more well attended because kids these days want to be engaged. They don't want to sit and watch 10 clinics. They want to play. They want to be the stars. We all know that. So what we do is and this doesn't all happen at PASIC, but the one time we can be in the same room together and have FaceTime, of course, is at PASIC. But we're sending out templates and initiatives throughout the year for ideas on how to make a healthier day of percussion. But at PASIC, we usually have, as we did this year, we have 2 chapter presidents that sort of present a PowerPoint with their model and what really works for them, not only in attendance, but in terms of financial sustainability. Like how can you, sort of make some more money to make a bigger event next year to put in your chapter kitty, so to speak. So we always have that, and so we have some great chapter presidents, and they're very happy to share what they do with all the other chapter presidents, and that would include the international presidents as well. I don't want to leave them out. So we have a lot of really strong international chapters too.
Who's doing the best?
Oh, put me on the spot.
Come on, let's do it. We ask tough questions here. This is basically the news.
I think one of the best chapters out there, they've won the chapter award last year in the States, would be Utah.
Yes, I was going to say it. I should have said it.
Mike Salmons is rocking. He's doing a great job.
Yeah.
And there are lots of others. So Adam Mason's chapter this year won, and a Canadian chapter. So there's a lot of really great chapters out there, but Utah seems to have a pretty good formula going.
So I'm from Utah, and growing up, I went to Utah State, and it was every year. I think it only happened at Utah State once, but I mean, we would carpool, we would go. It would either be at BYU or the U or Utah State or Weber, I think, one year. And it was just something I assumed happened at that level in every state.
Yeah.
And now that I've learned it varies a lot, I always tell the students, hey, you got to go to these. If your state's doing one, even in any capacity, that's great. That's really, really cool. and I think a lot of them think like I thought, which is like, oh, this is everywhere, and like everyone does this, and if I'm attending this, I'm just another student, and it's not necessarily.
That's exactly why the concept of the mini PASICs keeps coming back, where we can take a whole lot of resources, have an application process. It's a way for a lot more young people to be clinicians and guest artists, because it's still going to be technically an international convention. It'll just be a smaller version that's shorter, but it gives young professionals an opportunity to get their name out there, because it's hard to get on a PASIC, as we all know. So it's really about providing more opportunities for more members.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm so excited to hear about the little PASICs. And Casey and I have talked a lot about how much growing up with a really solid day of percussion or like really active chapter where you are is important, because he was in Utah and I'm from Tennessee, Julie. I don't know if you know that.
Where are you from? What town?
Knoxville.
Oh, okay, you're other end of the state.
Yeah.
We're about 9 hours from each other.
I know, yeah, so far. But yeah, I think I must have hit high school and undergrad when Tennessee was in kind of a lull state, because it seemed like once I was leaving and going off to grad school that it was really picking back up again. But
what year did you graduate from high school, if I may ask?
2004.
Oh, baby. Okay.
2004. Wait, Laurel, you're 45? Wait, my math.
Yeah, 2004. Yeah.
You're 30.
Yeah,
okay.
Almost. Yeah.
29. Okay. Yep.
So, moving on.
Well, excellent. Hey, hey, Ben. So, aside from not going to PASIC, what else do you want to talk about today?
Thanks, Casey. Well, because Julie plays in a percussion trio, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite pieces for percussion trio, and also one of my favorite pieces that I've ever performed. So I was wondering, has anyone in the room, so to speak, had an experience with Russel Peck's The Glory and the Grandeur?
We have that in our folders actually right now to play with an orchestra, but we haven't started working on it yet.
Gotcha.
So.
Has anyone else had an experience with this piece?
I
heard
it at maybe the first PASIC I ever went to, and I thought it was awesome.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is. It's definitely not what I would call completely serious music. It's very fun. Kind of has some cartoony sounding moments in it, but it is also actually, I think, a very well composed piece of music. It's not some sort of hack piece, and there are quite a few very challenging parts in this kind of almost vaudeville showy type piece. So anyway, Russel Peck's The Glory and the Grandeur, it's a triple percussion concerto. It was originally written for percussion group Cincinnati in 1988, and in 2006 there was a wind ensemble version commissioned by the North Texas Wind Symphony, which was premiered at PASIC. So in fact, give me just 1 second here, I forgot I have this in this room. But okay. There's actually a DVD called Percussive Palooza, which is it's not the performance they did at PASIC, but it's that same concert that has the recording of the Russel Peck Concerto, and it also has Keiko Abe's Double Concerto Prison Rhapsody 2, Bruce Yerko's Concerto for 9 soloists, and William Kraft's Concerto for 4 percussion soloists, with a few other pieces on here. So that's definitely a good DVD to check out if you have the time. But anyway, I got my train of thought here. The opening for this concerto was actually lifted from an earlier piece by Russel Peck called Liftoff, which was for percussion trio, no orchestra. The beginning of this piece is taken from Russel Peck's earlier piece called Liftoff, which we'll talk about in a bit. But that was basically all I said about it. So the stage setup for this piece, front and center are 2 xylophones that often engage in like dueling xylophone type parts. And then kind of surrounding those are 3 multi-percussion setups, each of which has a bass drum, 2 tom-toms, and a snare drum. Then if you're looking at the stage, on the left side there's a marimba, and on the right side there's a vibraphone. And there's some smaller stuff too, but that's the kind of basic outline of it. So the first section of this piece, the part that's taken from Liftoff, basically there are a lot of spatial effects where one bass drum will crescendo, and then as they're decrescendoing, another will crescendo, and then as they decrescendo, another one will crescendo. So you get this effect of the sound being passed around the stage. And it first happens, I think, in whole notes or dotted half notes, something like that. And then it starts to happen in half notes, then quarter notes, and it keeps on speeding up until it's just 1/16th note being accented, passed around the stage. And it sounds like helicopters taking off, hence the name Liftoff. The second part of the piece, it's kind of more meditative. It has some very theatrical sounding moments. There's a timpani feature from the orchestral timpanist, so it's nice to kind of collaborate with the solo percussionists and the existing percussionists in the orchestra. And then as the piece works on, there's a lot of really fast interplay between mallet instruments, where the vibraphone and marimba will be kind of dueling on opposite sides of the stage, or there are these really fast, kind of corny xylophone licks being played right at the center of the stage against each other. And then one of my favorite sections of the piece, all three players have like friction instruments. So someone's playing brushes on the snare drum, someone's playing Wiro, and someone's playing sandpaper blocks, passing sounds around. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. I got to play this piece twice during my master's degree, once with orchestra and once with band. Yeah, I heard North Texas perform it 3 times when they did it. It's always a blast. It always gets a standing ovation. It's a very energetic, fun piece. There's a couple pretty good recordings of it on YouTube as well, if anyone's interested in checking it out.
Do you guys find some of these pieces kind of come and go in waves? I feel like I don't see Liftoff as much as I did, I don't know, a few years ago, and I'm sure before that it was on a big wave, and I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah,
I think even, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just I think some pieces come and go and kind of have revivals, so to speak, but yeah.
I think also regionally too, because a lot of that will come from, especially smaller pieces will come from students seeing other students play it, and so I think, it ends up being played a lot at one school or in one state or one region.
Yeah, sure.
There's actually, speaking of Liftoff, there's another piece called Take That, and I can't remember the composer of it. Albright, yeah, and that was kind of, I think Albright and Peck were friends or rivals or something like that, and Albright, is Take That a quartet?
I think it's a quintet, but it could be a quartet.
But yeah, and I'm actually not that familiar with the piece, but I know they're kind of similar in some way. They were supposed to be kind of competitive pieces with each other.
I definitely had to study those in Jim Campbell's percussion history class.
Yeah.
Julie, while we're talking about a piece of rep, I'd love to just hear your general thoughts about the rep, and I don't know how I guess the health of the rep. How do you think it's doing, and what do you think we're missing, and what would you like to see more of, and what would you like to see less of?
I was just thinking that when Ben asked that question, or you asked the question too, why do pieces sort of go in waves, and you guys know, in our jobs, it's a great time, but also a tough time to program, just because there's really I feel like we're going through another explosion of percussion repertoire, and there's a lot of great stuff being written, and our kids get really excited about it, and they see it on YouTube, or they see it at PASIC, and they want to do all new, and we really have a responsibility to make sure that they're aware of the history of where we came from, and that we do pieces like Liftoff occasionally, or the Rhythmicas, or Ionization, and so we try to do a historic piece on every concert, but and they're into it. They're into those sounds and to learning about it. But I think it's a challenge as the rep continues to grow, and as we continue to cultivate new composers. This is the day of consortiums and commissions, and there's just a really big explosion. And also, the part that I really like about it is, it seems like there's a lot more, I don't really know the technical term, but crossover composers, so like the bridge between sort of this unaccessible contemporary music and pop music is really starting to cross over a little bit, and we have, composers like Ivan Trevino is a good example. I think Stephen Snowden is another, where, some of this music becomes, it's still complicated and challenging to our students, but it's also on another level a little bit more accessible and easy for non-academics to listen to. I don't know if you guys would agree, but I find that to be pretty exciting. And I don't feel like it's dumbing down our art form at all. I feel like it's sort of opening up avenues to a broader demographic of listeners and appreciators.
Do you think composers are able to do that because they're writing new music better? Like does it still have all the same elements the more cerebral academic pieces have, but we've just gotten better at it? Or do you think they are actually kind of different?
But me personally, I think that they're taking. Sometimes it's just the form of the piece, but sometimes it's the progressions, and just listening to groups like Coldplay, for example, and sort of, what's attractive about that music to the popular listener, and then how does that translate to contemporary percussion writing, and they're finding ways to sort of make those pleasing progressions happen, but at the same time finding some really challenging writing all the while. Like, I don't think that the music, I mean, maybe at times there are easier pieces, but I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah, this discussion sounds exactly like I heard Alejandro Viñao give a talk, and he talked about when you get into, serialist music with Berg and Weber, and it's fantastic music that, quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to listen to because it's not the most appealing thing to the ear oftentimes. And so Viñao talked about, I want to have that sort of compositional soundness in my own writing, but also make something that's very listenable. And so he talks about when you turn on the radio, the thing that everyone connects to is every song on the radio has a groove. And how can we incorporate groove into, this serialist, very high level of thinking music? And he's also kind of explored the idea of what is groove and what happens if instead of a 4/4 bar, what if I take 1/16th note out at the end and it turns into a 15/16 bar or something like that? And you hear that constantly in, Book of Grooves, obviously by Alejandro Viñao, but also his Estudios de Frontera. Both of those pieces really stick out to me as groovy, but also very contemporary pieces.
Yeah, it's very, I'm about to steal something from Casey. He talks about different levels of, not levels, but avenues of appeal for pieces of music.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's very smart.
I remember hearing Casey talk about this when he came here.
Yeah, it's very smart, and it seems like this kind of music, it appeals intellectually to those of us that know what's going on, but it appeals, maybe aesthetically or athletically to those that don't play music. And it seems like the more categories you can tick off, and Casey, you might have to list all the ones you came up with, but the more categories it fits, perhaps the more just successful the piece, and it's really going to stick around.
Yeah, my sister, she's a big music fan, but she's not a musician herself. She's a statistician. Of course, she keeps a careful watch on what I do and kind of a lot of things in our scene and what Laurel does. But she calls these two distinctions very clearly. I think she calls them art versus art.
And that's why Casey wore a scarf today.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah. Like I really like this lecture. Kind of thinking in levels of appeals. So I think when we're all young, we're kind of addicted to the athletic appeal, and you just look at someone and go like, wow, look at that person move their hands, or like, wow, look at that violinist. I had no idea you could even do that with the human body. There's this amazing athleticism to it, and you may know nothing about form or structure or theory or whether you're listening to something in major or minor, but you can still just appreciate that. And just the fact that human performance is there, and then of course you can kind of go further down and you start listening for more structure and more elements of musical theory, and then you can get all the way down to what I've been calling the conceptual appeal, which is like you're looking for what the piece really has to say and what its statement is, and at that point you don't even really care whether you enjoy it or not. It's just beyond that. Music of that good level of statement is just not about enjoyment, and I guess the enjoyment you get from it is gaining some kind of statement from it.
Yeah, and I there's more to this that I don't want to say right now because it's going to tie into Laurel's topic later. But for me, after hearing Casey talk about it, and this idea that he's talking about with the different levels, layers of music, so to speak, I almost began to wonder, like, you could think of two sliding scales with how compositionally sound something is, as well as how immediate, how enjoyable it is to listen to. So, like, a Justin Bieber song on the radio might be enjoyable to listen to because it has a groove, but it's not so enjoyable to listen to, in terms of intellectual appeal. Whereas, Berg or Webern might tip the scale the other way. And then when I think of like Beethoven is fantastic for the ears to listen to, and also compositionally very sound. And then I think the problem with this is you start to get into a discussion of, what piece of music is better, Beethoven or Berg, and that's, I think, a ridiculous discussion to have and doesn't really matter. So it becomes more about just, I think, kind of what Casey was saying, just experiencing the music without trying to pass judgment about what's better or something like that. But yeah, it's really hard to, especially in an academics setting, talk to students about this and try and justify, well, you should listen to Xenakis because it's so compositionally good, but it's like, what does that mean in and of itself? So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good way to be patient with students, because when you think of it in these different tiers, it's very clear. Okay, they're just kind of in this tier. I remember being there, no problem, and you just know it's a growing process, and you kind of have to go from one to the next. And I get frustrated when people force it on them. It's like that's not the way to make people appreciate Varese, is to tell them they're stupid if they don't like it, and
exactly.
It's just that's not helping,
I mean, likewise, like I'm a huge like Paul McCartney fan, but when you take a Paul McCartney song and compare it to a Nickelback song, they're really pretty much the same thing. They have a verse and a chorus and probably kind of similar chord progressions, but nobody enjoys Nickelback.
And they're equally good, I would say.
So yeah, it's like, what makes
Paul McCartney's got some good melodies.
I can't get into either. I really like this thing about balance, Ben, about like message, and I saw a art documentary that words this a lot better than I can, so I'll just repeat it. But they call it aesthetic versus utility. Yeah. So modern art tends to have higher, this is according to them, higher utility than it does aesthetic, meaning it's very useful as far as its message. So you're looking at that famous work of art that's just a toilet in an art gallery. I forget what that's called. But you guys know that, yeah.
It's probably called Toilet in Art Gallery.
It probably is, yeah, but in like French. But anyway, so Toilet in Art Gallery is, or you know what? How about 433? We could even call out 433 as kind of doing the same thing. It's more of a statement than it is something you're gonna like really enjoy. So the toilet in the art gallery is very low aesthetic. It's not hard to create. It's not hard to do. There's no talent involved in creating it. But the statement or the utility is very high. It's very clear that it's questioning what art is and what belongs in a museum, what doesn't. So that's very clear and obvious, but as far as enjoying what you're looking at, it's very low.
This reminds me, actually, are you guys familiar with the TV show Nathan for You?
No.
It's a Comedy Central show, and I started watching it while I do like warm-ups. It's on Hulu, but he does these things where he tries to help struggling business owners, and everything he does to help them is always absolutely ridiculous. But he was trying to help a bar by making smoking legal inside, again, because now smoking is illegal in bars. And there's actually a law in California that you can smoke indoors if it's part of a theater production. So he installed a row of seats in the bar and had two like art critics come in and sit and watch the play that they didn't know was just people smoking at a bar. And the two art critics were getting so much meaning from it and saying, there was so much intrigue with the couple sitting at the table, and the guy showing off his skateboard was it was mind blowing the amount of detail that went into it. Was like, and it was just a bar with people smoking in it, but people were watching, and so it was theater all of a sudden. So that really reminds me exactly what Casey's talking about here. Art is kind of what you make of it.
That's funny.
That's really fun. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Hey, well, great segment, Ben. Thanks a lot. Laurel,
Yeah.
what have you been reading this week, or maybe this morning?
Yeah. So, well, I read a lot, but I just happened to find the thing I want to talk about this morning. So, you guys, I read this article from Slate magazine online. I don't know if any of you read that, but
Slate magazine?
Slate. Yeah.
Slate magazine. Okay.
Yeah, like a clean slate. I was first introduced to it by Jan Swafford, who's a musicologist and one of my teachers at the Boston Conservatory. He writes for them, and so it started just looking at his stuff, and I've since kind of just, found other things I like. But this article that I found is called Sonata-Allegro Snooze, and it's by J. Bryan Lowder, and it was published less than a week ago, almost a week ago on Slate.com. And as it sounds like, the word snooze, it's the whole article germinated from this little seed of an idea that the author had about, one of the rudest things you can do when you go to see live music is to fall asleep, because there's people that have trained and they're performing for you. People have spent hours preparing it, writing this piece. So one of the rudest possible things you can do is to fall asleep to it. So he started there and was able to kind of juxtapose it with, well, hang on a second, but we use music in all these different ways, and he cites specifically, playlists on Pandora or Spotify, whatever it might be, that are specifically made to help you fall asleep. So it's music that you turn on, but you intentionally don't plan to listen to it, because hopefully you're going to be asleep. So throughout the article, he discusses in different ways and interviews composers, and he's really focusing on kind of two levels of a question. And the sub-level is, very specific. If you use music to fall asleep, are you actually disrespecting it? Really? And then the larger, more dramatic question is, what exactly is music for, and how are we meant to use it? And, I would add to that, does a person's use of that music always have to be in line with the composer's intent? And I think that's actually a really interesting thing to think about. But just for example, there are 3 composers that he interviews, and each of them has kind of a different viewpoint on what this possibly means to have your music be something that people fall asleep to intentionally. One composer, his name is Jason Eckhart, says, "I don't know of any composers, myself included, that wouldn't want the full attention of the listener." That's probably pretty obvious. Another composer, John Luther Adams, who of course just won the Pulitzer, says that people have talked about his music as soporific, and I had to look up what that means. It just means it kind of induces drowsiness and tiredness, and that though he thinks it's not a compliment, it doesn't bother him for his music to be called
John
that.
Luther Adams or John Adams? I think it was John Adams.
John Luther Adams.
It is
John Luther.
Oh, wow.
For Become, yeah, it talks Become
It talks
Ocean.
about Become Ocean.
Gotcha.
Is the piece, yeah. And then the last composer, and I find her stance on this really interesting. Her name is Suzanne Farren, and she says that sleep is so precious that any music that can assist in that endeavor deserves the highest level of respect. And she goes on from there to say some really, really cool things. And at the end of the article, Loudon, the author, even mentions this piece by a composer named Max Richter. The piece is called Sleep. It's 8 hours long, and it's for strings, piano, organ, and voice. And it's beautiful. You can get little trailer pieces of it through the article, but you can find the whole thing on iTunes. But its intent is to help people fall asleep. And he says he wanted to create a musical place that allowed sleep to happen.
Have you all seen on YouTube? You can find like 6 hours of singing bowl for relaxation. You can also find 5 hours of airplane noise, like just ambience. I don't know. It's interesting that it's very easy to find sleep-assisted stuff.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things about this article in terms of where it sent my mind and maybe where it sends you guys or anybody listening is that it says music serves different purposes at different moments. And I would think that with the 5 of us, we would say, yeah, there's no problem with listening to music to clean your house. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. But we also have this higher regard for it. You know, we think about music in a different way. Yeah, and it just makes me wonder. So
I think it's the layers. You know, I mean, like Ben and I were going for. I mean, there's nothing wrong with which layer you're at, of course. There's just, you know, what you decide to take from it. I'm sure we all agree. There's no problem with listening to anything casually.
Oh, right, yeah, and to go back, I think it's something that Julie said, maybe if they don't like that kind of music, or if the general public doesn't like a kind of music, you can't tell them, well, you should like it. You should enjoy it.
Yeah, I guess it's just if what you said about should the composer want to control what the listener feels, you know, I think that's kind of a dangerous precedent, because I think most of us would just say music is about feeling in general and emotion, and maybe that means really being relaxed and being in a calm place. And I've never really talked to a composer about that. It's interesting to contemplate, are they trying to make you feel a certain way, or are they just putting the art out there and allowing you to absorb it and use it in whatever way you can?
This actually reminds me a lot of, have you guys seen the video of John Cage performing Water Walk?
Yes,
Yeah.
I use it in class.
And so John Cage performs one of his very contemporary pieces called Water Walk on this television program. It's like I think it's some sort of variety show or something like that. It's a game show, actually, I think. But anyway, the host asks him what some people might find this, you know, amusing. Do you put this in the same category of music as Beethoven? And Cage says yes. And the host says, well, some people might be so amused by it that they would laugh. And does it bother you that people laugh at your music? And Cage says, I'd rather have them laugh than cry. So I think that kind of falls in here. I'd rather, as a composer, if I wrote something that sounds relaxing, I would rather have people fall asleep to it on purpose than not listen to it at all.
Yeah, I've heard the opinions several times, mostly from teachers over the years, that music has become a little too, it's a little too everywhere. I mean, you can't avoid music. It's all the time. It's like omnipresent, and that kind of devalues it is what I think the general belief is. So I think what Laurel's Slate article is getting at, I didn't read the whole thing. I read some of it real quick beforehand, but are we kind of devaluing it when we just treat it so casually? And I have heard that opinion before, and they say, no, you should only listen to it when you can give it your full attention. Otherwise, it just kind of, music's going to be this bland thing that's not special anymore, and it's just in every nook and cranny of culture. And yeah, I don't have an opinion there, but I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Megan. You haven't.
Well,
spoken.
also, I think it depends on, you know, like what. It's a different question of music being repurposed. Is it being repurposed for something that can be perceived as negative or positive? You know, and it depends on what you see sleep as. But I just Googled. I remember I read an article in an ethnomusicology class, and I can't remember the name of it, but I just quickly Googled music in shopping malls, because it was something related to that, and this other article popped up about music motivates impulse buyers, not thoughtful shoppers. People who tend to make unplanned purchases spend even more freely when shopping in the presence of background music, while contemplative shoppers buy slightly less than usual when music is playing. And I think it's just a matter of like what the repurposing is too, because also most collaborations with dance, some composers or some music is commissioned for music with dance, but a lot of times it's music that's already existing, and then the dance is being created based on the music already. So the composer doesn't necessarily have a say in that, or it wasn't created for the dance. So I don't know.
Dan?
Yeah, and then one amusing thing I found about this article, actually, I read it as well. It said something along the lines of, I can't think of any composer that would want his music to be ignored or not listened to. But then later on, the article specifically mentions Brian Eno. And Bryan Eno is mostly a record producer, but he's also created some of his own music, and he's come up with this idea of music to not be listened to. And I think that might be his exact phrase he uses, but he has a whole series of albums called Ambient 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Ambient 1 is called Music for Airports, and he uses like tape loops, and it's supposed to be music that could be played in the chaotic environment of an airport just to kind of slow things down and calm things down. And I actually listen to Bryan Eno a lot when I go to sleep, and when I was an undergrad, almost every night I actually put on Piano Phase when I went to sleep. And Piano Phase, I love Steve Reich, I love the piece, but it's not a piece that I want to sit in a concert hall and listen to for 20 minutes. It doesn't serve that function for me because it's pretty basic in its concept. It's just two pianos phasing over the same 6 notes or whatever.
You could sleep to Piano Phase?
Yeah, believe it or not. So anyway, I just hit the thing on my chair. Yeah, it's definitely, there's a certain function to that music to me that doesn't make me want to sit on the edge of my seat and listen to it, which does not mean that I don't enjoy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I always get a kick out of hearing classical musicians complain about pop music, and they'll say, well, it's just the same chord over and over. They'll say like, oh, there's only like 2 chords in that. Oh, it's so boring and it's too simple, and my brain is too awesome to deal with just 2 chords. And my response is, like, well, I hope you hear more than just a bunch of fancy chords in Beethoven. Like, there's so many more reasons why it's good. It's, but yeah.
Oh yeah, well, there seems to be there is this group somewhere of people that play classical music that think if it is deemed by the classical world as quality, that everybody needs to listen to it the same way, and that we have to stop what we're doing. And we were just talking to one of our friends who's an opera director and directing this opera seria by Mozart, which is like 4 hours long and sounds like a totally hellacious experience to me. But I'm not a fan. It's hot. Yes. No, but never mind that this opera was actually written to be in the background of this huge dinner. That was its purpose, and yet we're trying to put it on this stage as if it's like culture and people need it. It's like, no, it was background music. That's what it was. Yeah, it kind of goes both ways, I think. And
that's interesting.
Megan, what are you finding from Facebook there?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook question from Caleb Pickering, and this actually reminded me of part of our discussion on the plane, Julie, about your job as interim chair kind of helping you with PAS stuff or vice versa, and how they had some things in common. So Caleb is asking, PAS president seems like a heavy duty. What are some of the things you did or didn't expect getting into? And then, were there any parallels or oppositions in needed skills from your current job teaching and being interim chair?
Sounds like you got to be good at drinking.
This is sparkling water. I just now figured out how to click on the comments.
A lot of parties, a lot of get-togethers. You probably. Yeah.
No, this is no. It's been the challenge has just been how much day-to-day day-to-day work that it takes, just in terms of man hours. And we have the EC, we have a great team, so we have a liaison to chapters, we have a liaison to committees. So really my main job is to just oversee those, the umbrella of all of that, of the chapters and the committees, and to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. But primarily my job has been, again, to coordinate this new board of directors, and to really work with them on the governance, the financial sustainability, the priorities, the mission, the big picture concepts of the organization. And I'm a university teacher, just like you guys, so I wasn't really trained to do any of that. So with every single task that has come across my plate, I've taken copious notes and listened to the board's verbiage and a couple of times had to Google search some things on some calls with them to actually understand what they're talking about, and just be honest with them. They know my background, and they're coming from it from an opposite side, that they're not university teachers. They don't understand the stratification of the chapters and the committees and the student delegates, and so it's been kind of doing this, and then now I feel like we're here, and now we can go here. So I'm really, frankly, excited about that. Now, the second part of the question parallels in being the interim chair this year, which I just started July 1st. I've got to say, time-wise, it would be great to be doing one job or the other, because, as I mentioned, I have a really understanding husband, so I'm emailing pretty much every weeknight, on the weekends, this morning, right up until the show started. Otherwise, I would get behind, and I just want to allow that to happen, because I'm going to do a good job, and I've got another year and 17 days until I finish the PAS presidency. And then I think if I'm still in the department chair job, I'll really be able to do a fine job and have a good balance of work and family. But back to the point, having done the PAS president job since January 1st, I can run a meeting like no other at this point. So I have 17 full-time faculty, and I think they were, frankly, a little bit shocked when we had our fall planning meeting, and I was like, they saw the agenda, and they're like, there's no way we're going to get to all this. And I was like, boom, 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 done. And they were all like, they were high-fiving me at the end of our faculty meeting. They were like, what just happened? So, in that sense, it's been really cool, because I'm just not, it's easy for me now to really look at what the priorities should be of our department, set recruiting goals, and then also ways to make those goals happen. I'm more business savvy than I used to be, and I'm able to cultivate some development work in our department that I don't think had been done previously. So there's just kind of wearing that global hat of what needs to be done to make this organization really click on all cylinders. I've been able to bring that to my department in just a few months, and I think they're pretty excited about it. I know I am. So there's a ton of crossover there.
Julie, I had a quick question. You've mentioned twice, you said you have a very supportive I was wondering, because a lot of musicians I meet, I would say, are certifiably insane, and you actually seem pretty normal. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about work-life balance, and how, especially with all your different duties right now, how you've kind of come to that.
Yeah, I've got to say I'm definitely tipping the scale right now, just in terms of, we're all hugely busy. I know all of us on this show right now are very, very busy. So I would like the balance to come back a little bit more into the fact that, okay, maybe I could go a day and not answer an email and not feel like I was dropping some kind of big ball. So that part's a little out of balance, Ben. And as I mentioned, my house right now, my clothing would not be clean. I would not have groceries I'm vegan, so I have to have a lot of fresh produce all the time, and my husband has picked up all of that slack. He has just been amazing, but we agreed together as a family before. I had already said I was going to do the president thing, and he supported that, but then this department chair thing came up, and he was like, I don't know how you're going to do it unless you're just really burning the candle at both ends. And I said, well, it'll be temporary. It'll be about a year and a half where I'm actually doing both at the same time. I said, but I can't do it unless you kind of agree as a family we're going to tip the scale and you pick up a little bit of the domestic slack. And he's done exactly that, because he knew how important it was for me. So, I'm able to do a good job at both jobs right now simply because of the support that he provides. And in the meantime, I've also taken up playing with a new quartet in addition to Kaisha Trio, so I probably shouldn't have done that. But, the balance is got to be also about still making music, right? This leadership stuff is great. It doesn't pay a penny, but it's very rewarding. But at the same time, you have to remember what brought you to this in the first place, and that's making music. So, I've got to play. I've got to continue to play. And so David, again, has been really supportive in that as well. So I spent 2 days last week locked into a room with 3 other musicians, and we hammered out a lot of great music to play at our Tennessee State Day of Percussion this year.
Yeah, it's so hard in music, because it's not like, being an accountant where you do your accounting work, then at the end of the day you go home and you leave it. Music is very much part of your life. It's hard to balance like that.
So, but it's working okay. I think I can hang for another 13 months. So we'll see.
The countdown.
The countdown has begun.
Yeah. Julie, can you tell us about the new quartet?
Yeah, I would love to actually, Megan. It's called 10-4, but with an X, like an X and a 4. And just a little bit of history about this. Maybe at our Tennessee State Day of Percussion, I want to say 6 years ago, we had sort of an all-collegiate group, and then all the university professors got together for a big group photo. And so we had sort of a meeting in the middle of the day at lunch, and I said, hey, what would you guys think about next year at the State Day? Let's have like a faculty ensemble play. And they were like, yeah, that sounds great. Why don't you organize that? I'm like, okay, yeah, of course. So we went back home, and I sent out an email to every university teacher in Tennessee. And 3 people responded. So I'm like, great, it's a quartet, because I was going to play too. Well, since then, we tried to play a couple of times, but Eric Willie took a job at North Carolina, and then Andy Harnsberger was one of them, and he had a baby, and his wife at the time was like, no, sir, you are going to get off the road. And so we sort of never really got going, but we picked music and assigned parts, and then it just really didn't happen. Well, then me taking this job, the deal breaker with my dean, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to kill my program to do this job, so I've got to hire someone. So I was able to hire Dan Piccolo, who has his doctorate freshly from the University of Michigan, and he's been a fantastic addition to the faculty here at UTM. But then we also had Jihei Jung that got the Vanderbilt job. And so we asked both of them if they wanted to join the group, and so it's the 4 of us. Sorry, Josh Smith is the other one at Bethel University. He's about 30 minutes down the road, and so it's the 4 of us, and we kind of locked ourselves in last week and got going, and we have about 45 minutes of music put together, not perfected yet, but it's pretty good, so we're kind of excited, and still playing with Caixa Trio all the time, and we're going to be playing in Peru actually in April, and the Utah Day of Percussion in March, so we have some big gigs and some commissions coming up, but right now, Julie, the other Julie in the trio, has been living in Los Angeles for a couple of years because her daughter is making it big as a movie star. I mean, she's really trying to make it, and she's gotten a lot of great leads, but that's meant that Julie's had to be in California, and then Amy still lives in Indiana. So, you know, we come together basically and rehearse for like 2 days at a time before we play a gig. So in the meantime, it's been kind of fun to have these other 3 percussionists in Tennessee close by where we can just drive a few hours and make some music together.
Awesome. I always thought it would be Lalo that became the movie star, but it's
it's Lalo's genetics. So those girls are amazing.
I wonder if he's jealous. I bet he is.
He's out there right now, I think.
Is he? This is the Davilas, Julie and Lalo Davila, yeah, their daughters, like doing all this amazing stuff. There's another Facebook question from Charlotte Mabary, and I would actually like to kind of chunk something onto it. Can you tell the young people what it takes to get accepted as a artist or presenter at PASIC?
Oh, that's a really great question. It's actually a pretty transparent process. So the applications, which are due this year, not until January 2nd for those of you that are watching, we extended the deadline. It used to be the 15th of December, so January 2nd. And
thank you for doing that.
Yes, major thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. So the applications basically go to committees, and we have 17 standing committees, and the committees each have their own way of sort of reviewing the applications, and we don't dictate to them the way that they will do that. We let them decide. So sometimes it's the full committee, sometimes it's a subcommittee. They can really do it whatever way they want, and they have a certain period of time to review those, and then they rate each of the applications. And then at that point, they come to us, to the executive committee, and then we spend about, I would say we spend 5 hours on a Skype call, but all of us have watched I watch every application every year to make sure that, you know, some superstar doesn't get missed because their name wasn't known or something like that. So I really try and take notes and go through, and a lot of times there's video included these days, so it makes it a little bit easier to evaluate. But then we'll sort of take our own notes, and then we pull up what the committees have recommended, and unless there's just something glaringly wrong, for example, one of those things could be frequency of performance at PASIC, so we really watch that. We have policies on how often you can play in a row, so that way we're always cultivating new talent. And so sometimes the committees will miss that. And then I saw a question on Facebook yesterday. We might also look slightly to make sure that like there's not the same marimba company for every marimba artist. So we'll kind of look at the industry balance, but rarely do we make a change to what the committees have recommended to us, only if we kind of see that one of those two things is just kind of out of balance. And but we'll pretty much take the recommendation. So I would say if you're trying to get on, and I get this question all the time, you know, find out, you know, who those committee members are in that category that you're trying to participate in. And you don't have to be on the committee, but you know, you need to have some visibility to those people. So maybe, you know, you write some proposals and send them to the committee, or you look at where those members are and you try to present at the day of percussion there, or you basically have to have some visibility. Either your application is so stellar, they're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this person and they're amazing, or you sort of cultivate this awareness of what your talent and what you're bringing to the table is, and you make that known to the committee. I mean, goodness knows there's tons of talented people, and it's really hard to get on unless those committee members are aware of what you're out there doing.
My big plan is to become the president someday, and then every day of PASIC will just be the complete works of Casey Cangelosi. I think it'll go great.
For the record, I cannot perform, so we made that change a long time ago.
Well, when I'm the president, I will be the only one who can perform. That'll be
totalitarian Casey.
I know, I'm so humble and generous.
Now you're like on the blacklist forever now. You're never playing there again.
I just want to say I think it's great how it's done, and I just want to, you know, thank you and the past presidents for being the people who I know, frankly, will get a lot of bitter, mean people who, when they don't get accepted, I've seen people be really nasty, and I've been accepted and not accepted, and I always look at it like, you know, I'm applying, but I've also, if I don't play, I would love to just relax too. That's great. Right. You know, I even told that to John Beck Jr. once, because we were having the same kind of conversation, and it had nothing to do with me at the time, but I just said, yeah, I don't take it personally at all, and it's so silly when people do, and it's like really. You talked about service, and at the university level, but just in the general level for the field, this is a different kind of service, because you're putting yourself in harm's way. I mean, you're putting yourself as the fall guy to get blamed for what pisses so many people off, and I just want to say I think the people who are getting upset about it are in the wrong.
I was just going to say, real quick, to add to what Casey said, having performed at PASIC, the one that I think back to is I did the 50 Marimba Orchestra for the 50th anniversary of PASIC. And yeah, it's actually more fun to go to PASIC if you're not performing, because we spent so much time in rehearsal that I missed so much stuff. You know, it was certainly fun in a different way, but it wasn't the regular PASIC experience of going and hanging out with friends and getting, you know, just kind of be on your own.
Oh, yeah. Totally, and even if you don't have anything planned, if you, I mean, you're going to get asked to hop on this or hop on that, or I mean, you end up doing all these little things, and oh yeah, it's always a relief to not play. You know, you feel like, oh man, I got accepted, I got to take it, but it's totally fun to not do it as well. So. Anyway, thank you, Julie.
No, it's great to get to tell everyone about the process, so they know it's not just us in a room going, oh, I like that guy, I don't like that guy. So
right, like yeah. You know, you hear people say that all the time. They're just like, oh, they're probably their buddies with that person or something. It's like, I really don't think so. Like, I'll just say, I really don't think. I've met enough PAS past presidents. No, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think their buddies are itching to play that bad.
That's one of the reasons why we made the change a few years ago, that if you are the president, you can't participate, or the president-elect. Like, the only thing I can do basically is if my students want to submit call for tapes, because that's a blind competition, so you know, my percussion ensemble could play, but that's it. Mm-hmm. So it's just healthy. I mean, it means that, you know, you sacrifice a little bit, you know, to do that. I mean, I haven't heard music at PASIC in years, but it's about making it. It's about making it better for everybody else. So
I will say, probably with all the duties of being president, the last thing you want to do is also prepare a concert.
Well, yeah, I would like to go to an occasional clinic, but hopefully after next year I'll be able to go to some stuff again. But again, if the show is fun for everybody and they're enjoying it, and last year I think was a fantastic show, then I'm happy to take one for the team for a few years.
Yeah. Well, speaking of having fun, we got a question of what do you like to do for fun, or what will you do for fun when you find the time?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think everybody knows this about me, but I'm a Brazillophile, and I see something in here from Laurel about cat videos. I don't know what that. I just learned how to click on the chat button. I'm so slow.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Ben and I were talking about it if Casey ran PASIC. And Ben said there'd be LED lights everywhere, and I said, yeah, and cat videos.
Oh, that's just funny. I saw that, but my husband and I are dog people that live in a town not where we teach, so we had to become cat people, and now we actually say out loud with pride we are cat people. It took us a few years to come to that. So yeah, I like my cats, and we love to travel together. I mean, we're going to hop in a trailer and do 3 national parks in Florida next week.
You and your husband like to travel. I thought you and your cats like to travel.
Oh, no, the cats will stay. But, yeah, so I like to travel a lot. I love anything with Brazilian culture in particular, so I go down there a lot and take students, and I'm really passionate about music and social transformation, specifically in northeastern Brazil, so I like to go back and travel there and work on my Portuguese skills, and so we like home renovation. We're in a 100-year-old house, and we get down and dirty out in the yard and do a lot of gardening, and so that stuff's kind of stopped for me for a while, but I'll get back to it, after next year, and yeah, so just normal stuff. I like to swim every morning. I have a little lap pool.
Wonderful. Hey, well, thanks so much for joining us. This was really fun to talk to Dr. Julie Hill. And yeah, we didn't even touch on your Brazilian stuff.
Oh, that's no problem.
Dr. Hill has a Brazilian
Casey,
bio.
I'm going to hear about the lap pool.
Sorry, Megan. Yeah. Just quickly, I know we're out of time. I was a Zumba instructor for a long time and had a massive injury, a torn labrum, and so I had to have hip surgery and was in a wheelchair for 6 weeks. So after that, I couldn't run anymore or do any more Zumba. And I was starting to get kind of depressed because I'm an exercise freak. And so my husband was like, okay, we're taking out a second mortgage, and we're going to get you one of those pools that's really small that shoots out the propulsion. And so we have one on our back deck, and I use it every morning, and it is a life changer, worth every penny. So and it's heated, so you can be out there, and it's snowing, and you can still swim.
Wow.
It's a luxury. It's like awesome. It's my greatest luxury. Sorry, had to mention that.
So in addition to Ben missing PASIC, he's also misusing the chat feed. He says, mention there is a PAS article about the Brazilian stuff. Ben, you can just mention that.
Well, you were trying to wrap up, so I thought I'd give that to you. But Casey mentioned we didn't really get to the Brazilian stuff, but Julie Hill did write a PAS article. Is it like 2002, something like that?
Yeah, it was when I was in the doctoral program at Kentucky, I guess, so maybe 2003. It's been a while since that was a cover story.
It was a cover story, and you can check out some info about that there.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, and you also gave a fantastic PowerPoint presentation on Brazilian music and culture at Interlochen that Laurel and I saw, and it is so nice to see a world clinic that wasn't, hey, this is a slap, this is a tone, this is a, this is a conga, this is a djembe. It was so nice to have oh great, finally like a world clinic with substance and great substance. So
thanks, Casey. I really believe in kids have to learn about the culture of the people that make the music before they can learn the rhythms. I call that empty beats. So I don't do empty beats.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm glad there's a term for it, because Laurel will tell you also, we've seen clinics like that over and over and over, almost to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not going to this world clinic because they're going to just tell me the names of instruments and tell me the different things you can do with your hands again, Right. Anyway, I sure complain a lot. But time to wrap. So anyway, Julie, thanks so much. Fantastic talking with you, and yeah, all right. See you all later. Thanks for your segments, guys.
Thanks for your patience with me, everybody. Appreciate it. It was awesome.
I know, it was great. All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.